Well, they're back. This time about a picture of seashells on a North Carolina beach a year ago. And this won't be the end of it. But nothing has changed with me. I'm still innocent. I'm still not afraid. And I still believe in the independent federal judiciary. So let's go.
This won't be the end of it. Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock. It was almost exactly 1 year ago. The former director of the FBI, Jim Comey, was on this program at this table talking about that picture of seashells that he came across on a walk on the beach. They spell out 8647. And he's continuing to stand by what he told us then, that at the time he didn't know there was any violent interpretation behind that commonly used restaurant term, 86, and that he did not at any point intend for his post to be perceived that way, and certainly not for it to be viewed as a call for the assassination of number 47. But he deleted the post when he heard that those sorts of things were being alleged, and including by Donald Trump and members of his cabinet. Fast forward to right now, with Donald Trump's Department of Justice eager to deliver on Trump's wish to prosecute his critics. Jim Comey is facing his second indictment from the Trump Justice Department in the last year. This latest one over that picture we just had up on charges that he was, quote, knowingly and willfully making a threat to take the life of and to inflict bodily harm on the president. And second, that he knowingly and willfully transmitted in interstate commerce a threat to kill the president. The federal judge has set a date for his trial of July 15th. The case is so weak and far-fetched that, as we've reported on this program, even some of Donald Trump's staunchest legal allies have decried it as an unconstitutional attack on free press. There was this from Fox News commentator Jonathan Turley, quote, I would prefer to crawl into one of Comey's conversant shells and write a column supporting him. However, here we are. The fact is that I believe that this indictment is facially unconstitutional, absent some unknown new facts, end quote. Another Fox News fixture, Andy McCarthy, wrote this in the National Review this weekend, quote, nobody doubts that 47 refers to Trump, the 47th president of the United States. The question is what 86 means. On that score, acting AG Todd Blanche is flailing. The term, as we shall see, is ambiguous and most commonly understood to be nonviolent. Countless others continue to go uncharged for the same conduct. This all-out effort to target Trump's former FBI director is causing massive turmoil in places we can't always see, inside the Department of Justice. On that, the Washington Post writes this, quote, more than a half dozen prosecutors have been demoted or pushed out of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia due to fallout from the Justice Department's push to prosecute former FBI Director Jim Comey, leaving a key prosecutorial office understaffed and weakened. Other prosecutors have voluntarily decamped or scrambled to find new jobs, fearful they could be asked to work on cases that violate their principles. That's according to 10 current and former prosecutors familiar with the office and the case. Major cases, including one involving a terrorist attack in Afghanistan, have been hobbled by the turmoil. Washington Post adds this, quote, as the Justice Department gears up for the second prosecution of Comey, the cost to the department of the president's crusade are mounting. The shockwaves rippling through the Justice Department underline the high price of the president's single-minded pursuit of his adversaries to its personnel, resources, and mission. That is where we begin the hour. Joining us for his first interview since he was indicted by the Trump Justice Department for a second time, former director of the FBI, Jim Comey. His new book, Red Verdict, is his fourth novel. It's out tomorrow. I finished it this afternoon. We're going to talk about it. You dedicate it, though, to the men and women I just reported on, that the Washington Post reports on, the men and women who've either been purged from or have left the Department of Justice.
Yeah, there's a lot of pain in the department right now. Good people sacrificing their careers to do the right thing. I'm inspired by that, but I feel awful that they have to do it. And there are so many other good ones hanging on, trying not to have to leave the department. It's a time of pain and loss for a lot of good people. That's why I talked about them in my dedication and the acknowledgments.
What is your family's pain like right now?
Look, it's bad to be indicted. It's bad when someone you love is indicted, but they've kind of gotten used to the fact that because I've been a critic of Donald Trump, I'm a target. I'm sure John Brennan's family feels that way, Jim Clapper's family, and lots of others. There's a cost to speaking up in this strange era, awful era we're in now. And I think they accept that. I think they're proud that I act the way I do. I'm not going to be quiet. I'm going to continue to speak about what I believe. But of course, it's a burden for a family. That to me is a part that I regret, but they're strong people.
You had other family members though serving in the department, your daughter and your son-in-law?
Right. My daughter was a superstar prosecutor in the Southern District of New York and was fired only because she has my last name. That's stupid, that's immoral, that's illegal in my view, and painful. She'll be okay. I mean, she got a job at a law firm, and someday I hope she'll go back to the Department of Justice. My son-in-law, who was the deputy chief of national security at that Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office, quit the day they first indicted me. Also just a tragedy to have that apolitical talent leave the department. God willing, he'll be back someday, but it both tells you the quality of the people that this organization typically has and the cost with Donald Trump at the top.
Do you know Todd Blanche? Did you ever run in the same SDNY circles?
I don't. I think he might have been a paralegal when I was the U.S. attorney there, but I don't know him. Not saying that to be facetious.
No,
I think he started out as a paralegal, which is an important role, but you don't have much to do with the U.S. attorney.
I ask because I went back and looked, and Donald Trump first used Twitter to call for your prosecution in 2017 or 18, and some combination of Don McGahn, then the White House counsel, Jeff Sessions, then the U.S. attorney, Bill Barr, who came next. There was one guy in between. And then Pam Bondi, I guess, who allowed this to go forward, but only at great cost to that office, which was essentially hollowed out. The variable isn't Donald Trump's desire to see you prosecuted, it's Todd Blanche. And so I wonder if you think there's anything personal there.
I don't think so. I think it's just Donald Trump continuing to move through people until he finds those who will literally do whatever he says. Maybe he's found that with Mr. Blanche, maybe not. Maybe his standards will be too high, as apparently Pam Bondi's were, which is a bit of a shock.
Just saying something?
Yeah, and so she's apparently headed for some important private sector job we haven't heard about yet. That may be Mr. Blanche's future, or maybe not. I don't know. But Donald Trump has a bottomless desire to gain revenge against those who've criticized him. And I'm not going to stop criticizing him because I think that's required if you care about America. And so it will just keep going. If he gets rid of Blanche, he'll try to find someone else. Look, at the bottom of every barrel, there are still apples. And so he will find someone to do what he wants to do.
Do you think that's where we are with Todd Blanche, at the bottom of the barrel?
Only time will tell. I mean, Pam Bondi, I thought, was not a good fit for the role, and her standards were apparently too high. So we'll see.
What is it that you are accused of doing?
In the current indictment, making and communicating a threat to assassinate the President of the United States.
And what did you actually do? What is your defense?
I'm not going to talk about that because as I've said many times, I believe in the independent federal judiciary, and the court rules require that if you're participating in a criminal case, you don't talk about it outside of court. And so we'll have a lot to say in the courtroom, but I want to respect the rules and the court.
Then absent any specifics, I mean, he has said to my colleague, Kristen Welker, that they're not investigating anyone else who posted this message, 8647, just you. Were you aware that you were under investigation, or are you aware of what the other evidence is they have other than that message, which is on Amazon right now for sale?
Yeah, I hate to stiff arm you, but I'm going to do the same thing. It's very important that we respect and obey the rules of the federal court in North Carolina and everywhere, even if others don't. And so I'm not going to talk about that. Except to say, as I said earlier, I am not only not guilty, I am innocent, and we will pursue this fully. The
first time you were indicted, you released a video like that, and and I think you said it last time we were on this show, you talked about your faith in the independent judiciary. Do you think that is the only leg standing?
Yes, with the exception of something that John Brennan mentioned in your last segment, that there are good people holding the line in the intelligence community, in the law enforcement community, and among federal prosecutors at great risk to themselves. But because of the risk to themselves, it's not a reliable leg. The federal judges are a reliable leg. No matter who appointed them, they believe in something, and it's very different from the way that Donald Trump approaches justice.
Someone made the point when you said that the first time that a stool can't stand on one leg. I mean, how long can we balance on one leg as a country?
We're going to have to balance for another 2 years, and I think we can do it after 250 years of doing that. The genius of the founders' design is that the federal judiciary really does stand apart. I've dealt with federal judges my whole career. There's a powerful culture that goes to bedrock there. They care about their reputation and reality to be people of integrity and people who wear a blindfold in deciding cases. And so it's a tough act to balance on one leg, but I believe the federal judges can. And we'll get another leg, I believe, in November. There'll be two legs on the stool after the coming wave, which I'm no expert, but I think that's coming. The American people feel this and have had enough of this.
What is it like to see people who are your detractors, people like Jonathan Turley, defend you and basically denigrate the case that's been brought against you?
Makes you a little nervous.
I was sort of like, how bad is it that Jonathan Turley is now a Comey defender? But it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. And I'm not sure what he means by crawling inside one of my shells or whatever, but I think that it's important that people speak in an honest, open way about these things. Again, I don't want to talk about my case. They're chasing John Brennan just because he has spoken out and spoken the truth. I don't care where you are on the political spectrum. That should offend you, and you ought to stand your butt up and speak about it.
Why do you think people like Lisa Monaco and Merrick Garland stay quiet?
I don't know. I mean, I can't look inside someone else's life. I've not walked in their shoes at all. I think.
But or Chris Wray. I mean, we've walked exactly in his shoes. Why wouldn't it be helpful if he was out there as Chris Christie's former attorney, as a Republican president's handpicked replacement for you, defending the men and women of the Bureau?
Look, I would like to see it, but I don't know how he thinks about it. What I hope has not happened is that Donald Trump's aiming at people like me and Brennan and Clapper and others has chilled those people, made them afraid to speak. I hope we're not there because they strike me as people of character, but I can't judge them individually.
Well, without judging them, would it be helpful to our democracy if people who have held these jobs before were telling the American people how far from normal we are?
Yes. I think everybody ought to speak. Bill Barr ought to be on your show talking about the dangers he sees and that he thought that person should never be near the Oval Office again. And look what happened when we put him back. Everybody who has a voice ought to be speaking up. But again, I can't balance what they see risked by speaking up. I don't know what their family circumstances are or those sorts of things. I am going to continue to speak up because I have grandchildren, and someday they will be old enough to understand this time, and I want them to know what Pop did during this period of time. I hope everybody feels that way.
You said this won't be the last. Do you think they're going to indict you again?
Oh, I don't. Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think Donald Trump wakes up at 3 in the morning thinking about me. I do not. The reverse does not happen. But I'm sure that if this case falls apart, they'll come with something else. I'm going to have to deal with this, as I've told my family. They're going to have to deal with this as long as Donald Trump is in the White House thinking about me in the middle of the night.
Have you heard of other jurisdictions looking at trying to bring cases against you?
I've read stuff in the media about it. I don't know whether it's accurate or not.
Do you think that the case that fell apart in the Eastern District of Virginia is something that they're going to try to, that was about testimony to Congress?
Yes.
Do you think they're still poring over you testified before Congress dozens and dozens of times. Is that something that you think they're still scrubbing and trying to find something?
I guess maybe, but if there's a blessing, it's that the statute of limitations for alleged false statements is 5 years. So they had to hurry on the last one. They were running out of time. I haven't testified in front of Congress since the fall of 2020. So they're probably poring over things, but there's not, first of all, there are no false statements. And I don't think that's going to be productive. But they'll continue working on it because that's what the boss wants.
I remember when you were on book tour. I think that might have been the first time I interviewed you. But your first interview, I think, was with George Stephanopoulos. And you talked about the first time you were around Trump's first team, which I think has turned over entirely with the exception of Jared Kushner. It reminded you of Cosa Nostra, of a mob family. That was such a better group of people, for lack of any other word. I mean, that first term included people like Jim Mattis and people like Jeff Sessions and people like John Kelly. I mean, what word would you use to describe this group?
There doesn't appear to be anybody left who is willing to stand for institutional imperatives, norms, things like the rule of law in the face of a desire by the president. There were those people in the first term. Trump spotted it and wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. Apparently it happened a little bit, at least, with Pam Bondi, so she's gone. What it tells me is that he has found the crew that he was looking for.
What does that mean for the country?
It's bad. You never want time to fly, but it means it's going to be a very difficult 2 years and whatever it is, 2.5 years. Thank goodness for the elections this fall. Thank goodness for the judiciary. But we're in for a rough ride, which really shouldn't shock anyone who knew what Donald Trump was, who knew about January 6th, about the 2020 election lies. All of this was in some ways predictable, and now we're going to have to live with it. I'm going to have to live with it.
When he calls you a dirty cop, what is he talking about, and how does that make you feel?
I don't. Honestly, it's crazy that I'm in a place where I'm 65 years old and I actually find it a little bit humorous to have this obsession by this 80-year-old man with me. I don't know. And I am an honest person. I am a person who was raised to stand up and speak out. I can't do any other.
He is, based on media reports, investigating a grand conspiracy. His press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, went to the podium of the White House briefing room, I think in the summer, and described it as this Carrie Mathison, like if Carrie Mathison wasn't smart, scheme to cook the intelligence. And I don't know if it has Trump winning and then I don't know, but it involves you. I mean, do you think you will be investigated as part of their grand conspiracy investigation out of Florida?
It's hard to say. That is really red string on the basement crazy wall stuff. And so it's hard to assess from a distance. I gather they found an 81-year-old guy, Joe DeGenova, to come back to government for the first time since Duran Duran was on the charts and lead an investigation. Again, they're trying to find people who will do that which principled people will not do. And so anything's possible with this crowd.